What's up, everyone? Welcome to week 14 of the absolutely epic early week podcast. I am your host, JM to Win. I'm pumped to be hanging out with a couple of my buddies. It's a fun little weekly tradition we have going on. I don't know how many people listen, but the three of us have fun hanging out. So I'm going to bring in our first permanent member. I almost said guest, but I guess we're all just this is our house. We all just hang out here. So, Bobby Fi, how you doing, man?
Well, first of all, I want to say that introduction really scared me. Is somebody firing me that I don't know about? Where did that come from? That sort of caught me off guard. So I was doing really, really good. But
Until that.
Yeah.
I have a knack for ruining people's days. So let's just say that was my contribution to your day right there.
Oh my God, you're like the Drew Brees of the show right now.
Don't even bring up Drew Brees. That was so miserable. Which, by the way, speaking of Drew Brees, I brought up in my game-by-game breakdown that my one concern was, that the Lions slow down the pace more than any team. And then it's like Brees throws for 300 yards and at least 3 touchdowns in every home game, not against Seattle. And I was like, oh, okay, slow down the pace. Don't freak out about that. And then he goes out and puts up 0 touchdowns, but whatever.
Yeah.
I think I'd still play him again. But
you play him all the time. I just want to say that Lions defense, it's kind of crazy how much people overlook the fact that they hadn't given up 20 points in 4 games, and they've had some tough competition. They had that crazy game against LA. Since then, they've been rock solid with Slay on the outside. They're a legitimate defense. I never thought I'd be saying this, but they are. I still think you have trouble against 2 and 3 receivers, even though this week didn't prove that, but they're a good defense.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if Brees was unhealthy or something. I mean, every throw was to a running back or a check down. It was pretty bizarre, like not normal Drew Brees. So there was a lot that went into that, and definitely the slow down pace hurt a ton. But we'll move on to week 14 and have a better pick than Brees at quarterback this week, right? So we're gonna bring in our third member, and that is Jennifer07. If you're wondering why Grant always has to go last, it's because we start out with Grant's rant. So Grant, what do you have for us this week?
This is just a short one. Little life advice for you guys. When you're drunk, the worst possible thing you can have around is a pair of clippers. There's a pretty decent chance that your armpits are going to look like a bonsai tree, and you're going to shave a nice little smiley face into your stomach if you get drunk enough. And believe me, that will happen if you are anything like me. I happen to know one person on this podcast may or may not have shaved off something between his eye and his forehead one time, but that may or may not be me, or maybe someone else, who knows. But in any case, play Chargers, play Seahawks this week. Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
I feel like we all have our vices, and that is just yours, is drinking too much and then going to the Clippers. So that's something I think Bobby and I have been wanting to talk to you about for a little while anyway, so I'm glad you brought it up. And,
can I say that I'm not one to talk, because I've twice had my head shaved and once had my eyebrows shaved because of lost drunk bets. So that's not a lie. That is 1,000,000% true. And anybody
I'm almost certain that's a lie. I'm pretty sure you shaved your eyebrows twice and your head once.
No, it definitely was the head twice. It could have been the eyebrows twice as well, but hey, maybe I was too drunk to remember.
Probably one of my favorite tweets I've read all year was when Grant said, paraphrasing, but if you want to be contrarian, the best thing to do is do your research during the week and then get really drunk on Saturday night and build your lineups. I thought that was really great wisdom and a great way to be contrarian, is just take all the information you already have and filter it through the lens of drunkenness, see what you come up with. Yeah. So that leads us seamlessly to week 14, which is the drunk uncle of NFL DFS weeks. I don't really know why. That just seemed like a good comparison to make. And we're going to start out talking about, I'm kind of deviating a little bit this week on trend or trap, and they're not necessarily single player usage trends or traps so much as there's a couple big picture things that I think are interesting to talk about this week and get Bobby and Grant's thoughts on. So the first thing we're going to talk about is usage trend across a team. And Grant, I'll start with you first because you always have some good stuff to bring up in regards to usage. But this is going to be the Bears passing offense. So a lot of people used Marquise Wilson last week. I did too, and I wouldn't have been on him except a lot of people I respect really liked him a lot as well. I was concerned about his snap count from the week before, and then I went back and watched his Week 12 game on Saturday night, and he did just look like by far the best receiver on the Bears. But, of course, John Fox is an idiot and forced the ball to Josh Bellamy over and over again. He dropped 2 more long touchdowns or 2 more long plays this last week, one of which would have been a touchdown after dropping the game-winning touchdown the week before. He still got 6 targets and a carry. Cameron Meredith was on the field almost every play. Marquise Wilson got hurt. Deontay Thompson was on the field more than Marquise Wilson. So, Grant, this week they play the Lions. We were just talking about this Lions defense isn't as bad as people think, but they are still bottom 3 or 4 DVOA against the pass. Anybody that Darius Slay's not on is generally a good person to target. So what's your take on the Bears receiver usage heading into this week? Let's assume that Marquise Wilson misses or continues to see limited snaps.
That was one of those things where people were worried about playing him this last week because of the fact that he didn't see a whole lot of snaps on the field. But they picked one guy to target over and over again every single week throughout the entire season. And I think that this had some huge weather concerns and it was a little bit of a blowout. Like there's a lot of things that pointed towards this being a strange game in terms of who's going to get targets. And it's something that I think Barkley, they have a new quarterback and basically an entirely new set of wide receivers now with White out, with Alshon out, and with Royal out, and with Miller out. They're still figuring things out right now. And so it's going to be kind of random, which gives any of these guys huge tournament flyer potential because they all could be the number one guy. And whoever's the number one guy on any single week in the Chicago offense seems to be the guy that's going to get a lot of production.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting to me is that Bellamy was open a lot. And I don't know how much of this game you got to watch, but the week before, Wilson had 11 targets, and then Thompson, Meredith, and Bellamy all had 9 targets, which is insane. As we saw this last week, the Bears don't want to throw that much. I mean, Barkley had like 5 passes at halftime, but Bellamy was open, on a couple deep passes that he flat out dropped, and then they kept going back to him. So it almost seems like they're wanting to force him as the main guy, even though Meredith is kind of a better fit for that number one receiver role. Bobby, what's your take on this situation and just early week thoughts? You have any interest in going to Bears wide receivers this week against Detroit?
Yes, I have a lot of interest in going to Bears wide receivers in Detroit. In Detroit is being the key word. How you guys could have possibly started Marquise Wilson, especially you, JM. I'm a little disappointed in you, just to be honest. I don't understand how you could have started him in this week. I had Meredith as my pivot, and with the weather, there is no way I was going to be going there. There just was absolutely no reason to. You had Gabriel for the same price. Like, it really made no sense with the weather being how it was. And the Bellamy play, you know what? Things happen. You have the third, whatever. It was in the snow. It was a weird game. Like, let's just throw that one out. Like, you don't want to take receivers in games like that. In a dome, when you actually have to have a number one, and the number one is not Marquise Wilson. He happened to be in 1 week. And even in that week, I think, what did he have? 3 more targets than, was it 12-9 against Meredith? Meredith was targeted 5 times in the end zone. 2 of them weren't considered targets, actually. So I think it was 11 targets because 2 of them were actually penalties. So Meredith is the number one receiver. He's the guy you'll take this week. He's the smart play. He's the best play. He's going to be the lowest for everything, for GBPs, for cash. He's going to outperform all of them, and he is the best. He's their number one receiver, period.
So well, first off, in defense of that play, I love playing wide receivers in the snow because route running, it's easier for them to get open. I mean, I used Jordy Nelson this last week too. I love Jordy
Nelson. A different situation. That's a very, 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 very different situation. When you have Matt Barkley behind center and you have Aaron Rodgers, I absolutely love. I had Jordy Nelson everywhere too. I loved it because Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, and I understand that you have an advantage perceived, but that was a whole different kind of game, and the game flow of it could have gone any which way. I just had no reason to use their receivers. When I saw the weather reports, I thought I was out of it. I still I took Cobb and Jordy in a ton of my tournaments. I just decided that Wilson and Meredith had to go. Mostly
that's fair. I would blame Levitan because it was on Friday night. I don't know if you guys got to watch the show, but Jeff El Jefe ditched us, and so it was just Levitan and me. And He was really high on Marquise. I was on the fence at that point. But I would blame Levitan, except I've had some bad calls that I got him onto some bad stuff this year. So we're probably even in that regard. Grant, any final thoughts on this Bears passing offense and usage this week at Detroit?
So Bellamy also had 9 targets the week before. So that's one thing that you can hold your head a little bit higher on playing Bellamy this weekend. But then also Aaron Rodgers in the snow is completely different. He's one of the best home quarterbacks of all time. So snow should not matter because it's always terrible in Green Bay. But yeah, I can see Meredith. I'm not sure who I'm gonna use. It's gonna take a lot more research throughout the week, but we'll figure it out.
And then Bobby, one last quick thought for you. Any concern on Darius Slay following Cameron Meredith around and those targets going elsewhere?
A little bit. I just don't think that he's going to do that because, as most people think, Marquise Wilson and Josh Bellamy should seem to be the best receivers on that team. And I don't know that they're just going to shadow him with Slay, regardless of what they say before the game.
Yeah, and I think that the thing with Bellamy and why I bring him up is I think you can probably get Cameron Meredith for 8% ownership this week. I think you can probably get Bellamy for 1 or 2%. Because most people don't even know the guy's name, and he has 15 targets over the last 2 weeks, and they whether they should or not, they seem to be forcing the ball to him. So I like Bellamy this week. I like Meredith this week. I don't think that either guy is going to end up being a must play, but I think they're both interesting spots.
But JM, I just want to say one last thing, that if that's really true, if those percentages are right, I totally agree with you. I just don't think those percentages are right. I mean, it's Monday, so what do we know? But I just can't believe that people aren't going to be on to Bellamy and off of Meredith a little bit this week, more than they should be.
Yeah, I mean, and we'll keep an eye on. And for anybody who listens and is a premium subscriber, Chris Germino's ownership projections are extremely accurate each week. So keep an eye on those to see. But yeah, I just think that Bellamy is a guy who isn't even in anybody's mind because he still hasn't done anything. And unless you're watching the games, you don't really realize how much they're using him. It could be one of those things where Bellamy and Barkley practice together a lot on the second team, and he just is comfortable looking to him. So something to think about there. The next thing I want to talk about is this Tampa Bay defense. So Tampa Bay, I had some numbers pulled up. Oops, I shut down that tab. They're still giving up yardage, right? But their pass rush has just been ridiculous the last few weeks. If you watched any of the Chargers game, Phillip Rivers looked really unsettled in the pocket against Tampa Bay. And I'm not saying necessarily play Tampa defense against Drew Brees, although Brees does tend to turn the ball over on the road. But I've really enjoyed targeting particularly Michael Thomas away from the Superdome because people just kind of jump off the Saints offense as soon as they leave the Superdome. All these, Drew Brees struggles on the road, but Brees still usually throws for over 300 yards on the road. There's still a lot of good things to target. It's still a great offense. But this week against Tampa Bay, who's allowed 21 points to San Diego, 3 points to Seattle, 17 points to Kansas City, 10 points to Chicago. They have at least 2 turnovers forced in 4 straight weeks. So, Bobby, I'll start with you first on this one. Do you have any interest do you think that the Tampa defense is for real right now? Young team getting better throughout the season, or do you think you'll be going to some of the Saints players as sneaky guys in tournaments?
I hate to say kind of yes to both, but that's sort of where I'm at. I feel like that Tampa Bay defense, I still feel up in the air. I do think they're young. I think they're exploitable. There's going to be a game where they get blown up. I'm not saying it's going to be this week. I don't know. But I also feel like the Saints, it's a great spot. I love what you said about Thomas. I totally agree with that. He's a legit like future 10-time Pro Bowler with his skill set if he has a quarterback like Brees for his life. I mean, with those hands and that size and his route running ability, I think that there's a lot of sneaky. I mean, not sneaky. They're going to be lower owned than they should be, and I think taking Saints receivers makes sense. But I also do believe Tampa Bay's defense is solid. I wouldn't stack the game against them, but I also think they're going to have a slip up here and there because they are young.
Yeah, and one thing about the Tampa and actually it speaks exactly to the slip up thing is DVOA. For any listeners who are newer, I use DVOA a lot because it's the only advanced metric, opponent adjusted, schedule adjusted statistic that we have. And so coming into this last week, I believe Tampa was 27th against the pass in yards allowed per pass attempt, but they were 10th against the pass in DVOA, which means opponent adjusted taking away just, a big play here and there, that they were the 10th best pass defense in the NFL. And, so they do slip up sometimes because otherwise they wouldn't be allowing, the 6th most yards per pass attempt. But if they've started to tighten up those gaps, and that really makes it difficult to target guys against them. It's an interesting situation because Saints on the road is usually sneaky. If this were in the Superdome, I think this would be a great place to fade because ownership would be super high. But it becomes interesting because ownership will be low, but then the matchup is tougher than most people think. So, Grant, what's your take on the Tampa defense and on using New Orleans pass catchers or running backs this week if you think the running back situation can be unraveled?
I'm fine with using any of those guys. I mean, one thing we really have to look at here is who did they play? San Diego, Seattle, Kansas City, Chicago. I mean, I'm not sure about Chicago's offensive line, but the other three really are, especially Seattle and San Diego. Both of them have been hampered by injuries most of the year in the offensive line. And so they're going up against guys with terrible lines, and I think that might have had a lot to do with it. And, I mean, I watched the Seattle game. A lot of that had to do with, like, passes being dropped. Like, just they were out of sync the entire game. So I'm not entirely buying in. I think they're better than we thought weeks ago, but I don't think they're as good as we think they are now. Like, I think a lot of it, the pass rush has to do with going up against teams with terrible offensive lines. And, I mean, you probably know offensive line rankings better than I do, but I mean, look at the games where they lost. It's against good offensive lines.
New Orleans, who they play this week, is 6th in adjusted sack rate as far as having the 6th best offensive line and adjusted sack rate. San Diego is 17th. Seattle is 24th. Chicago is 9th, but Chicago is awful at the quarterback position and everywhere else. I mean, you wouldn't expect them to put up points against Tampa. So that's a good point right there as far as if, like Tampa's a legit team. They're 7-5. They're tied with the Falcons for first place in the division. I believe the Falcons have the tiebreaker at the moment, but like Tampa's a legit playoff caliber team, like 6th seed, but still playoff caliber team. But New Orleans is, probably a top 8 team. And I don't think it's outlandish to target some Saints offensive players in this game. One last thought from me on this is division games are typically lower scoring because the teams see each other a lot and they're more familiar with one another. It's easier for them to figure out how to stop players. So something else to keep in mind here. But Bobby, any final thoughts on this New Orleans offense before we move on?
No, I mean, I just think that they're always a good offense target. Home or road, just because of the ownership percentage gets so low, and maybe not Breeze on the road, even though he can do it. I would mostly pick Thomas, like you said. But yeah, they're always worth targeting just because of their upside.
And then Grant, any final thoughts here from you?
You mentioned Chris Jimino in his ownership percentages. He also has a great chin beard. That is all.
Yeah, and if you are a premium subscriber, you can enjoy the chin beard as well. That's part of the package, so keep that in mind. Next thing I want to talk about, and I think this is something we will all agree on because Grant already mentioned it earlier, and I know where all of our thoughts tend to go on a situation like this. But Russell Wilson at Green Bay, defense that, Dom Capers has been there for, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it's been, has long struggled with running quarterbacks. Russ has his legs back. So I want you to talk to me about Russell Wilson and then also just a little bit about – so I'm going to throw this out here real quickly. Green Bay, I believe, ranks 11th, maybe 10th in DVOA against the middle of the field, defending pass in the middle of the field. They rank 32nd on the left side of the field, and they rank 32nd on the right side of the field. So Russ tends to throw middle of the field most of the time. Jimmy Graham is in the middle of the field. Doug Baldwin's in the middle of the field. I think those guys are still in play this week. But Jermaine Kearse, who is minimum priced, $3K on DraftKings this week, saw 9 targets last week, led the team in targets. He's seen 5+ targets every week. And obviously will be playing on the outside. Lockett will be playing on the outside. So, Grant, as the Seattle native and Seahawks fan, I'll start with you here. What are your thoughts on Russ and on his pass catchers this week and how you want to approach this game?
So I'm going to be all over this game so hard, and we'll probably get more into that later.
And actually, a quick question too to throw in there: if you were playing like 1 or 2 or 3 lineups, also bring that up, like who you would be most focused on, or who you'll have the most ownership on, sort of thing.
Russell is my number 1 quarterback this week. Rawls is one of my favorite running backs this week. Baldwin is not as high as I want him to be on my list. I'll have to look into it more, but that's just because of Graham. But you mentioned that they don't give much over the middle. But you got to realize, even Baldwin, he tends to go deep and get open deep a lot. When he had all those touchdowns last year, very few of them were in the actual just red zone. A lot of them were him going streaming up the field and catching a long bomb. Like, one thing we actually have to really mention is that Seattle was number 32nd in the league, I think, in the first, 10 weeks of the season, 9 weeks of the season in terms of rushing yards per game. And since Rawls has come back, and when Prosise and Rawls were there, like the last 3 weeks, I think, or 4 weeks, they've averaged 135 rushing yards. Granted, they had a Lockett 75-yard rush and Prosise like a 50-yard rush over that time, but they actually have their running game back, which opens up so much more. Plus, they have Wilson running the ball, so they really can't. Green Bay is the worst receiving or worst DVOA against receivers, I think, in the entire league. And with the rushing attack being opened up, this is going to be a massacre this weekend. That's it.
All right, Bobby, what's your take on this situation, and specifically, what do you think about Jermaine Kearse as well at 9 targets this last week and 3K?
I'm always a fan of Jermaine Kearse. I don't care if he has 0 targets the week before. I think he's worth a shot if you play in multiple GBP lineups. This week is the ultimate. It's a great situation. It's unbelievable for everyone on Seattle. I think Thomas Rawls might get overlooked again. It's just an amazing spot. I think it's a great spot for both teams, to be honest with you. I know this sounds really weird, but I think this is going to be a really good game, and I really think that Green Bay has an excellent shot at winning this game. And I don't know if I'm just obsessed with Aaron Rodgers or what it is, but I would bet on Green Bay to win this game if it was even. I think that he'll find a way. He's a guy I might take naked this week, like as a quarterback, just because I have no idea who it's going to. But I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, and I love everybody in it. It's really hard for me to pick from the Green Bay receivers other than Jordy, but he's going to be the hardest one actually to take in this. I don't know. It's hard to pick their receivers, but I will take Aaron Rodgers all over the place. I will take Russell Wilson and all of the receivers all over the place, and Thomas Rawls.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a good point as far as if we can unravel which receiver will have the success. I mean, I believe Jordy lines up on the right side of the field about 56% of the snaps or so, which runs at Richard Sherman. The Packers have shown in the past a willingness to leave Jordy, to run their normal rotation on the field and let Jordy run routes at Sherman, which could open things up for Devontae Adams this week to be the guy who posts a big game, or could open things up for Randall Cobb or whatever it ends up being. Yeah, and as far as Kearse, I just looked this up. He has 5 targets inside the 10-yard line this year as well. He has, to put that in perspective, Jordy leads the NFL with 11 targets. So, I mean, that's not, I guess you hear 5, it doesn't sound like that much, but considering the league leader has 11 targets inside the 10-yard line, 5's a lot for a guy priced at 3K. Kearse has 0 catches on those targets, which is part of the reason why his salary is so low. But I do think that this is a really interesting game to target, and I don't know that you have to bring somebody back on the other side, on the Packers side, say a higher dollar tournament or a single entry tournament. But if you're running out multiple lineups, I think it's worth it to take a shot on various guys on the Packers side as well. Grant, any final thoughts here?
Yeah, so Kearse was the number 1 red zone target, I think, for the Seahawks last year. Jordy, you're going to get a lot more production out of Jordy just because of the touchdowns. Like, even if he's going up against Sherman, he's the number 1 red zone target in the entire NFL right now. So I think it's worth playing him on the other side. And one thing we have to realize is that the Sunday night game was Seattle. And so I think DraftKings already came out with the pricing beforehand. So Lockett's sitting there at $3,700 right now. And that's just because they didn't have a chance to change it because it was the late game. So that's another thing that you really need to look into. And Rodgers is one of the best home quarterbacks of all time, which I just stated a little while ago. So that's something where even going against the Seattle defense, he's definitely in play.
Yeah, I think one thing on Lockett to keep in mind is he has had, 3 of his last 4 games, he's had 6 targets. So it's not like he saw some sudden spike in targets, just some of them hit. But this is obviously the type of spot where some of those could hit again. I point that out just because I don't want people to think that Lockett's usage has suddenly changed or that his role has changed. It is the same, but Lockett is always in play. And like Grant said, 3,700, his price would be much higher if they had taken into account the production he had on Sunday night. One last thing on this. So Jordy leads the NFL in red zone usage by quite a bit inside the 20. He has 23 targets inside the 20. The next most is Larry Fitzgerald with 16. Well, Larry Fitzgerald, Emmanuel Sanders, Allen Robinson, Michael Crabtree all have 16. But Jordy has 11 targets inside the 10. Devontae Adams has 8 targets inside the 10. Aaron Rodgers throws the ball more than any other quarterback in the NFL inside the 10-yard line. So there is production to go around to multiple guys, and I think that Adams will also be a viable play in tournaments this week. Bobby, do you have any final thoughts before we move on?
No, I think you guys pretty much nailed it. I think there's one really, really, really weird sneaky play because of the way the situation sets up. Maybe you look for Starks or Montgomery. That's all I can say.
I know, man. I would love for Montgomery to actually get the usage that his talent warrants. But yeah, if he suddenly, we saw Christian Michael had a bunch of carries this last week. If they say, okay, that's not working, why don't we try Montgomery? Montgomery, his usage spiked a bit this last week, but maybe it could go up again. Kind of like Ladarius Green. I used Ladarius Green on one Millie Maker team just because his usage should have gone up given the way he'd been playing and finally did. So I think you could do that with Montgomery. And if your bankroll, if Millie Maker is your max bankroll, then throw Montgomery on a $3 team or on a quarter arcade team or whatever in case his usage spikes this week. I think is a good way to go there.
Yeah, for sure. I also think Ladarius Green is an awesome play the rest of the season.
Yeah, the dude is way too talented to be losing snaps to Jesse James, who is 6'9" and nothing else, But
Jesse James got 4 out of the first 5 targets other than Le'Veon in the game or something like that, and then he didn't get. It was all Ladarius after that.
And then they're like, oh hey, we have this guy who's really good. Yeah, when you see good players being underused, I think it is. Again, with a smaller percentage of your bankroll, but it's worth it to take a shot on somebody who you're like, oh, this guy's really good and his usage is down, but it should trend upward at some point. I think Montgomery is that type of play. The next one I want to talk about is the Bengals. So the Bengals don't have A.J. Green. They don't have Gio Bernard. They have Tyler Eifert back. I wish I had used I'm drawing a blank now on who the Bengals even played this last week. Who did the Bengals play?
Philly.
There you go. Philly's tremendous over the middle and horrible on the outside. And so I gave a really close look to LaFell because of that. He's their outside guy. Boyd is their inside guy. And LaFell set up really well. He's seen 9 targets in back-to-back weeks or maybe 3 straight weeks. He's seeing usage. So this week, Cincinnati plays Cleveland. And so obviously Cleveland's horrible against the run. They're horrible against the pass as well. So, Grant, I'm going to start with you first on this one, and I want to know what your thoughts are. In my mind, Jeremy Hill is almost like a TJ Yeldon at this point. I don't really care how much work he's getting unless he gets touchdowns. It's not helping us a ton because he just doesn't do much. And then, DraftKings is spiking up pricing for guys against the Browns. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on Hill and whether you can pay. I think he's $5,800 for Hill. And then also just the pass catchers, Boyd, LaFell, Eifert, and where you're interested in going this week against Cleveland.
Yeah, so you can pay for Hill. His salary kind of will keep his ownership incredibly low. You just look at the last 2 weeks, and those have been his worst 2 rushing weeks of the entire season. And maybe it's because one was going up against Baltimore, and then Philly's got a pretty good D. But he can get multiple touchdowns in a game, so he's a fine use in a big field tournament if he's at a low ownership. LaFell, I think, still a good play. Eifert's an elite play, I think, because I think Cleveland is last in the league against tight ends. And Dalton's numbers haven't gone too far down since he lost A.J. Green. So he's still going to be slinging the ball, and someone's going to have to get reception. So Boyd, Eifert, and LaFell are all at play because they're not that heavily priced. Boyd's at $4,900 and LaFell's at $5K. I prefer LaFell in that situation, and he's a guy that can get a bunch of red zone targets. So really anyone's play. I wouldn't even be totally against playing Dalton, although I'm not sure. It would have to be in a smaller field tournament because his upside is not that high, but this matchup is just a beaut.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is when you get a situation where the target distribution is really narrow and the prices are still low. I remember 1 week earlier in the year when I used like 3 Bears players and I almost used 4 because they were all priced, like under 4K or under 4,100, and there was just so much usage to go around to so few players who were all low priced. Like I think Cody Core is his name, is the Bengals number 3 receiver, and he had a long reception last week, but he only had 2 targets. And so basically the ball is going to Eifert and Boyd and LaFell. The matchup for Eifert is incredible. Obviously the matchup for all these guys is great, but I love Eifert at 6K. I mean, if he were a wide receiver in this matchup, he'd be priced with his usage. He'd be priced, up around 7K, 7,500. So I think he's still a steal salary-wise. Bobby, what are your thoughts on the Bengals offense and this situation against the Browns this week?
I am loving this game. I'm all about it. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this is my favorite game. There is absolutely nobody on both sides of the ball who I'm not obsessed with in this game. I understand everything, all the points you made. Just we're talking about one side of it, but I just think that this is the game that will win someone $1 million this week. This is an ideal setup for really weird shootout, a crosstown rival. It's a really, really, really perfect game for everyone. There's not a receiver I don't like. There's not a player I don't like. I'll take RG3. Give him to me. You know what I mean? He might start, they said today.
That was about to be my question, was if RG3 plays, you have interest in him. So you answered it.
I absolutely do. If they believe he can play, why not? Give him – look, they're 0-12. They're playing a division rival. It doesn't take that much. Kaepernick's been horrible. Well, real life, not horrible, but the team is horrible.
Kaepernick or Kessler?
Kaepernick. I'm talking about Kaepernick. I'm just explaining how RG3 has similar ability because that running ability is a game changer. I mean, if you can somehow he could have a terrible game. They could lose by 20. They could still put up 21 points, and he still could run for 100 yards and throw for 300 yards. That's how crazy this game is. He has the ability to put up those numbers. There's some weapons out there. Corey Coleman is a real weapon. I actually think that he's not. I mean, obviously Pryor is the guy everybody will go to. Barnage might be the best play of all of them. There's weapons there on both sides of the ball, though. I mean, obviously we know who it's going to be for Cincinnati. Now that they're down, it's going to be Eifert, it's going to be LaFell, and it's going to be Boyd. I mean, it's just take your picks. If you want to really game stack it, you can take this. This could be one of those weird shootout games that wins someone $1 million. I really feel like that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have failed to recognize that Cincinnati's defense has been far short of elite this season. They rank 17th in DVOA against the pass, 22nd against the run, and I believe that their yards allowed per carry and yards allowed per pass attempt match up pretty closely with those numbers as well. So, Bobby, any final thoughts here on that Cleveland side before we move on?
I think I pretty much covered it. Love everybody.
Oops, I said Bobby. I meant to say Grant.
That's what I thought. No, I mean, I wouldn't play Barnage. I don't think RG3 throws it all to the tight end, but Pryor and Coleman, the pass attempts are going to be there somewhere, and I think there's a decent chance that Cincinnati gets out to an early lead. So Pryor and Coleman are going to get a bunch of targets, and they're going to get a bunch of points, and I will enjoy having them in my lineup because of that.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a good game to look to as a whole. I got in a couple hours of roster construction work today and was looking at spent some time digging into Pryor and Coleman in addition to the other side of this game. So not sure that I'll end up there if I run out a limited number of entries this week. But I definitely think that a lot of guys in this game are in play with one really bad defense and one subpar defense. Last one we want to talk about is Carson Palmer, who I'm proud to say that, which I'll put out this disclaimer. This has been my toughest NFL season of my DFS career. But I did call, like, by week 2 that Carson Palmer was just dead. So my question now is, it seems Carson Palmer himself has realized that his arm is dead. This last week, he threw 11 targets to the classic outside the numbers receivers. He threw 29 targets to what would be considered check down options. So I'll repeat those numbers: 11 to actual outside the numbers guys, and 29 to slot receiver, running back, and tight end, that being Larry Fitzgerald, David Johnson, and Jermaine Gresham. So this week they play Miami, who is actually a pretty good pass defense. They didn't show it this last week against Baltimore, but they're back at home. They're in the playoff hunt. Good pass defense. I don't love the spot, but I don't think you have to love the spot to love David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, Jermaine Gresham even, who's priced $2,500. So, Bobby, I'll start with you on this one. Carson Palmer did still throw 8 targets to Michael Floyd. He still tried to force those outside. He completed 3 of them, of course. But has Palmer started to realize, I mean, because the big thing here is Bruce Arians is just moronic. Like we talked about this last week, he's going to throw the ball. He threw it 46 times this last week against the worst run defense in football. So this week, a smart coach is going to run on Miami and not, force things through the air, but we know that won't happen. So Palmer's going to throw it 40-plus times again. What are you thinking, Bobby? Are most of those going to David Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald, and Jermaine Gresham? And does that make all 3 guys usable this week?
Yeah, it makes everybody usable. I don't know if I want to go with Gresham. It's just, okay, it's David Johnson's team. Just let him take over, do his thing. If they lose, they lose. Your defense is good. Like, this is the best player on your team. I don't really know that I'm ever going to look to anyone else. I wrote it like in week 3 that David Johnson is the best player in football when you factor everything in this year. I'm not saying, Tom Brady, yes, maybe the greatest, all these things. David Johnson is the most valuable player in football. That team has no business doing anything. Carson Palmer is literally, I could throw with my left arm a little bit better than he could throw most of his throws. And you know what? To his credit, he's smart enough to take those checkdowns. He's not making as many mistakes as he could be, as many as he does still make. But he knows his limits. I don't really think that there's anybody I'm really in love with on the receiving side of the ball. Miami at home is pretty good defensively. I mean, remember what they did to the Steelers, and that really shocked me in a few weeks back. They had a tough week, in Baltimore. Like, I don't know. Things happen. I'm not really targeting the receivers. I just think David Johnson is just always a guy you want to have. I don't care if he's 50,000 and 9,800 is a lot, but he should be in some of your lineups. I don't really want to touch anybody else in this game, I don't think.
Yeah, I think before last week, I believe Joe Flacco had in 10 games against not the Browns, Flacco had, I believe, 5 passing touchdowns, maybe 6. So the fact that he hung whatever it was, 3 or 4 passing touchdowns on Miami concerns me a little bit, because this has been a good Miami pass defense. They're ranked 6th in DVOA. They have been running the ball more than any team in football. They run the fewest plays per game in the NFL. They do a great job limiting opponent plays. So 9,800 on David Johnson is extraordinarily steep in a game where, the Cardinals run the most plays per game in the NFL. So they'll probably run they usually run about 71 plays, and they'll probably run more like 63, 64 plays this week. So that is tough in a sense to go to David Johnson at 9,800. I do think he'll get you still 25 points because he had 12 targets last week and 11 the week before and 11 the week before, plus his carries. Grant, what are your thoughts on the Cardinals, the pass catchers, David Johnson, the whole shebang?
I've had David Johnson in like 90% of my lineups the last 2 weeks. Jermaine Gresham was my call last week. If you don't remember that, I was a pretty big genius and still am. I think, it's all going to be funneled to those 3 guys. And I think if you assume that if you don't play Johnson, play Gresham and Fitzgerald, because the touchdowns are going to go somewhere else. but play David Johnson regardless. I would always say, yeah, I don't really need anything else to say. Play David Johnson. Play him. No one else really is usable except for Fitzgerald because he's going to get 10 points just from PPR, and Gresham because he's minimum price, and there's not a lot of tight end value around this week. So if you can get a 10-point game out of him, which I think he should have, then you're golden.
Yeah, one thing on Gresham, and I hate the idea of rostering Jermaine Gresham, but we've talked about how this is an offense that fundamentally does not emphasize the tight end, but Gresham's been running over 20 pass routes per game, which is much higher than this Cardinals offense usually gives us from a tight end. So Gresham is for real as far as these aren't just spiky usage things. He's been getting 5-6 targets. He had a 10-target game. I do think we can trust Gresham. I don't know how high the upside is, but as Grant said, if you can get 10 points for 2,500, that's pretty sweet to enable you to fit in somebody else. Optimally, I want to only roster guys that I feel can get me 20 points. But, if you can get that kind of value, that's still a pretty sweet deal. So we're going to move on to talking about, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to hand out some consequences, tweets and consequences here, or do we want to move on to love at first sight? Grant, your call.
Let's just do that, Dan, right before I'll save you a little bit of time before your sadness.
All right. Sounds good. So we're going to move on to love at first sight, where each of us pulls out the game that's standing out to us, or one of the games that's standing out to us the most at the start of the week. So Grant, I'm going to throw it over to you. Why don't you go ahead and give us a love at first sight story and the game that's standing out to you?
So I was in Vegas once playing a nice little slot machine, and this girl comes up to me at 3 o'clock in the morning and asks how I'm doing. I knew something was up because no girl's going to talk to me at a slot machine in Vegas at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I immediately say, "You're a hooker." And apparently you're supposed to say that they're working, not hooker. That's very offensive. But in any case, fast forward to the next night, this girl brings me over to her table for some reason and force feeds me like 10 drinks that she was just buying at a club. And I immediately go back to the night before and get into my mind that she is a prostitute. So I'm calling my friends to try and figure out if she's a prostitute at 2 in the morning, because that's where my mind goes there. I wake up the next morning realizing, oh, she definitely wasn't a prostitute. She was into me. I really fudged that up. The love of my life is gone forever. But the point is, don't let recent past hold you back. Everyone remembers Tampa Bay 2 weeks ago against Seahawks, and they think, oh, they might not be good. But then again, this situation that just happened is beautiful, and she is not a hooker. So play Russell Wilson, Lockett. You can play Lockett and Kearse in the same lineup, and you only have 6,700. And even if they just did what they did last week, that still gives you a chance at the Millie Maker. There's beauty all over this, and I think the Seahawks have, I'm not certain about this is just off the top of my head, but by far the most 20-point wins in the second half of the season over the last 5 years. Like by far. I think they probably have about 16 would be my guess over the last 5 years. And they will not pull their hand off the throttle, especially when they want to make a point, and they are just going to crush Green Bay in terms of scoring points. Maybe Green Bay will put them up, who knows, but they pass the ball a lot. So, JM, you can tell me if the game flow predicts that they're going to have a lot of plays, because you seem to know all those things because you're a smart guy.
I love that like hearing your love at first sight story is kind of like hearing a joke in that you don't really know how it's going to end. I never know how you're going to pull that into a game, but that one was pretty flawless. So I appreciate that one greatly. Green Bay, I believe, allows the third fewest opponent plays per game in the NFL. And it's not really even a pace thing so much as they do a good job holding on to the ball. They should be able to do that against Seattle as well, but Seattle, I believe, runs like 60, 61 plays per game. NFL average is about 64 to 65. So Seattle doesn't really need a lot of plays to do their damage anyway. They'll probably run a couple fewer than normal this week, but that shouldn't make a huge impact because they kind of break the rules in that area. Bobby, what are your thoughts on that game and on a game that's standing out to you?
You just went, there's too many things to respond to, but I'm just going to go real quick with this. First of all, Seattle, they are the best play. I love the play this week. I I honestly, I was at a bar with Grant. This is not a love at first sight story, obviously. Otherwise, but I was at a bar with Grant watching the games on Sunday, and I said halfway through about 2:30, which maybe was not so prophetic to say that at that point, but I thought that it was interesting. I said, I think the Seattle stack is going to win a tournament, like a massive Seattle stack. And I hope Grant remembers that, because I did say that. And he had a lot of Seattle-Carolina combo stacks. I don't think we knew who the quarterbacks were going to be at the moment. But it was interesting. Anyway, I'm all about the Seattle stack. I don't care about how many plays. The reason why, partly why they get up so few plays, is it doesn't take a lot to score on them. Green Bay and Seattle is an awesome call. It would have been my call of the week. I found a better game. I found a game I like better. It's obvious. I just said it earlier. Cincinnati at Cleveland. I love this game so much. I am going to go back to I love it so much. I'm going to go back to that RG3 at one point in his career will have a better season than Andrew Luck.
What?
Has that not already happened? His Rookie of the Year season?
One more. One more.
More.
I believe in this guy, man. I'm telling you.
That is extraordinarily bold. But
this is the first time I've ever not had the craziest thing said on this podcast.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. But you know what? I also have been adamant that for 10 years, since he was 17 years old, Russell Westbrook would be the best player in the NBA. And you know who's the best player in the NBA right now? If you don't think it's Russell Westbrook, I'm okay with that. If you think it's LeBron James,
this is a football show, so it's Tim Tebow.
If you think it's anyone else, you're out of your mind. It's Russell Westbrook and LeBron James. So he's one of the two best. I think he's the best. Anyway, and I'm saying at some point RG3 will have a better year than Andrew Luck. That doesn't take much. Andrew Luck might play 2 games in the year, and RG3 might play 10 games. That's a better year.
Oh, that's fair, especially with Ryan Grigson still being the GM in Indianapolis and thinking that offensive lines are unnecessary to have.
Yeah, why protect the guy who you're paying?
Why protect the guy that you're investing huge amounts of money into?
Look at Russell Wilson's entire career. Boom, roasted.
Some guys are better. Some guys are good enough where they don't need lines, and I think one of those guys. Period.
I am going to go with something also obvious. I've been looking through these lines for this week, and there's currently only one game with an over-under above 48.5. The 48.5 is San Diego and Carolina, which is definitely an interesting spot. And I know you guys love San Diego games always. I think that's an interesting one to target. But the only game with an over-under above that is New Orleans and Tampa at 51.5. Now, I think that this line will probably come down because New Orleans' run defense is actually pretty good right now. I believe they're top 12 run defense in DVOA, and their pass defense has gotten better. Tampa Bay's defense is good. I don't think this game hits 52 points. Granted, last week I said I would pound the over on the Lions and Saints game, so what do I know? But this is a great spot to take Tampa players, and I kind of feel like, and we don't know what the chatter will be yet, what ownership will be, but I kind of feel like this Tampa spot will be something that will go a bit overlooked, and Cameron Brate is going to be in play. Mike Evans is going to be a great play, and he had a dud this last week, which is not unexpected against San Diego's strong pass defense. And even Jameis Winston, I think, is playable this week. So I'm probably less on the New Orleans side, but I do like the Tampa Bay side. I even think Doug Martin is usable if he's healthy. I think he hurt his back or something this last week, but if he's back out there this week, like I said, New Orleans run defense is better, but Doug Martin's usage is so high. I think there's a lot of things to like on the Tampa side in that game. So before we move on, Grant, any final thoughts on my game or the game that Bobby brought up?
Well, this last game was the first time, I think, in Mike Evans' entire career where he had less than 20 targets at 6. So this could be, they could be starting, it could be an aberration. It could be that they're starting to switch over to spraying the ball out a little bit. And I don't know if that's true, but Mike Evans, I don't know if I want to play him because he's more expensive than Antonio Brown this weekend, which he doesn't present as high of a ceiling, but his floor, because of the targets, are always there. So I don't know if I want to play him. But yeah, figuring out who else to play in that lineup, Brait is a great play. And if you get the right guys, then it could be an absolutely great spot for Tampa Bay receivers.
Yeah, one thing about Mike Evans that is always worth noting is he doesn't have a ton of yards after catch. I don't want to say ability, but just he doesn't show much after the catch. So he, rarely hits these massive 150, 200-yard games that Antonio Brown and Julio Jones can hit. I say rarely. I mean, nobody hits those games. But for being priced near those guys, Mike Evans has one game this year at 150, one at 132, and then everything else has been 105 or below. But he did have a 5-target game earlier this year and bounced back with 13 the next week, 11 the next week. So I think we can still bank on the targets. But that is a fair point. He has tons of red zone usage, end zone usage, way more than Julio Jones, by the way, who gets almost no looks near the red zone, but not the same after catch upside. So definitely something to think about there. Bobby, any thoughts on that Tampa-New Orleans game before we move on?
Yeah, let's not look at last week and have recency biases against a team that was clearly playing double/triple coverage against him the entire game. He had 6 targets for that reason alone. You can't do that to them all day and not have them run those little slip screens with Humphreys. So maybe he's an interesting play this week. But I think that Evans is almost an unfadable in my mind this week. I think that he gets 14 to 17 targets, maybe even more. I think he has 10 receptions. I think he has 150 yards. I think he has 2 touchdowns. This is a week I expect Mike Evans to light it up. I love the game call. I have an Evans-Thomas stack. I've made one lineup, and they're both in it. It's a perfect – it makes a lot of sense. Evans should go off this week. And even if they try to double him, the Chargers' defense is much improved. New Orleans – who have they really shut down as the number 1 receiver, starting with Amari Cooper week 1? I mean,
Odell Beckham?
Julio Jones?
Week 2? Yeah, Julio Jones.
But they got beat up otherwise.
Yeah, no, but you're saying number 1 receiver. No, I'm with you on Mike Evans.
But against teams that can't beat them up otherwise. That game against Atlanta, they were getting beaten up anyway. Wait. You're saying that okay? I'm sorry. I was looking at Tampa Bay's numbers. Still, it's absolutely absurd to me to think that Mike Evans isn't like an auto play this week.
But Grant said David Johnson, like that you can't fade David Johnson or just play David Johnson no matter what. I don't think you can fit both guys. Totally, you can fit both guys in your lineup. So, Bob, you would rather play Evans. I mean, both guys in your lineup with a good team around them. You'd rather play Evans this week?
I think you could. Like Lamar Miller is like the best value possible. He's 5,600. I know it's still expensive, but you can take cheap guys like Jermaine Kearse, like we mentioned earlier, like Ladarius Green. You could take 2 tight ends if you want to throw in Barnage. There's a lot of options you could go with that still get you those guys.
Kearse, Lockett, Evans, and DJ. Bam, you're averaging 6,500 a player. Boom.
Yeah, I don't want to say upside because Kearse and Lockett they have upside. Like I don't think that you're maximizing your overall ceiling by.
No, you can't play them together. You absolutely cannot do that, Grant. You're crazy. If you do that, then you're on the Seattle stack. You can't play the other guys. You cannot expect them.
I'm an adult. I'm allowed to do what I want.
They both need 2 touchdown game. Well, one needs a 2-touchdown game. The other one needs a 100-yard, 5-6 reception game.
They both need 6 receptions, 50 yards, and a touchdown, and bam, they've already made value.
They made value, but they're not making your team. I mean, and then you have to count on these guys each to get 35. I'm not saying Mike Evans is going to get
hit value from your 3K guys, and you also need to hit value from. I mean, 150 points, which is hitting value, doesn't win you a tournament.
Yeah.
So you would need 40 points from DJ and Evans, which I guess DJ can get you 40 points, as we saw last week, but. No, so Grant, you would be fine taking the savings and playing Evans and not, which you don't like Evans as much, but you'd be fine taking the savings and playing Evans and DJ together, or say DJ and Le'Veon Bell together, or something like that.
I was gonna say DJ and Antonio Brown, who's 200 cheaper than Evans, and yeah, I'll be doing that a lot.
Right on. Okay, so we should move on to, speaking of value. And so we're trying to limit ourselves to just one guy that each of us likes in the interest of time and listener attention, because the 3 of us are getting paid to hang out and chat about football, so we could go on all night. But I'm sure most of you would get sick of us if we went much longer than an hour and 10 minutes. So we are trying to limit things to just like one guy who really stands out to us, which is great because we're talking about some of these higher price guys we'd love to fit in. Quarterback, I mean, I don't think so. All right, if we're going to say, we typically say below 6K, you could also say Andy Dalton at 6,100. I'd like to say that I don't mind Aaron Rodgers at 64. Russell Wilson, obviously, we all like at 66. But if we're going to say below 6, I'm going to say Eli Manning is a guy who's interesting. The Cowboys obviously slow down the pace, limit plays, but Dallas is a great run defense and one of the worst pass defenses in football. And Eli Manning's only 5,500 with some weapons. Odell Beckham is obviously an elite player, and Sterling Shepard is a solid player. So I could definitely see going 5,500 at Eli. Bobby, I'm going to start with you. Is there anybody under 6K you would actually want to use, or are you just going to try to go up to the 6,600 range?
Give me RG3, baby. Give me RG3.
All right. I like it. So if RG3 plays this week, you'll have him on some of your teams?
Right now, I have 2 lineups that are $300 or more, and they each have 4 separate lineups that are sub down from that. It's a total of $700 per lineup, and both of them have RG3 as a starting quarterback as of this moment.
I like it. All right, Grant, what about you?
Colin Quackerdip. I think I pronounced that wrong. Yeah, he's 5,800. He's going against the Jets that have just a terrible DVOA against the pass.
He was my other one. Nice job, Grant. Sorry.
Hooray, we agree. But yeah, it's just easy. And people are going to be off him because of the 2 points he put up last week that still actually made me cash in cash games, surprisingly. Don't know how that happened. I had Breeze and Kaepernick in 100% cash games, and I cashed in 80% of them.
So I left off one guy who you guys didn't mention because I assumed one of you would mention him, but I do feel I'll break the rules to mention an extra guy, and that's Carson Palmer, only in that he throws the ball so much that at 5,700, he's not great, but here are his pass attempts in his last 6 games: 46, 45, 38, 49, 46, 49. So this guy throws the ball so much that I think that he's usable, even though he doesn't look good. He can get you 20 points at 5,700. Running back. Bobby, I'm going to throw it over to you first for running back, and any other thoughts you had on quarterback if you want before we move on.
I'm just going to say I think it's funny how you mentioned Carson Palmer in the 2 most opposite lights, and I'm with you on both sides of it. I get where you're coming from. So I'm actually with you, and we're both fucking hypocrites. We're saying the opposite thing.
Swear jar.
Sorry for the F-bomb. But you know what? I was watching him the other day, and he said 74 F-bombs. So you know what? I can say 1 or 2 fucks.
We haven't had one since week, I think 2 or 3. So week 3.
I would like to join in, guys. Poop.
Oh, that's not fair. That's disgusting, Grant. That's disgusting. Come on, man. All right, so there's one running back worth playing. He's not under 5K. Sorry about that, guys. It's Lamar Miller. He's 5,100. It's close enough. Take every running back against Indianapolis. Every article I've written this year about football has said that. And I've been wrong about a lot of things this year, but I'm not wrong about this. Maybe I was wrong tonight with Forte, but I don't even actually know what the final numbers were. Maybe I wasn't wrong. I think I probably was, though. In general, just take the running backs, especially if they're pass-catching backs against Indianapolis. Lamar Miller can become a pass-catching back because his quarterback is that inept. He's 5,100. It's way too cheap for his upside. Forget his last week of 2.8. It means nothing. It means 0. Look at his game against Oakland in week 11. That's more what you can expect in this type of flow, this type of offense.
Or his last game against Indianapolis,
where he put up wait, that was my final drop in. That thanks, Shane.
Sorry.
I
ruined it. Let's start over. Let's pretend I never said that.
I was going to drop it a big, or you can look at his 34.8 against Indy the last time they played.
I've ruined your day twice now.
Yeah, and Lamar Miller and Le'Veon Bell belong in all of your lineups, in my opinion. And you can fade David Johnson all you want for the first time, even though he's the best player in football.
All right, Grant. Who do you have, and what could you possibly have that'd be a hot take that would top you can fade David Grant across the David Grant. Who's David Grant? You can fade David Johnson across the board. you can definitely fade David Grant. I will give you that one.
Hide your wives, hide your kid. Carlos Hyde going up against a great run D. I don't care. Frank Gore put up 79 yards against him, and we know that Chip Kelly is a real stubborn son of a beasting, and he's going to run that ball. And Hyde has 2 touchdown upside in any given game. He's 4,900, and his ownership's going to be crazy low, I think. But I think there are multiple plays under 5K, even though Bobby says otherwise. But now you go, JM. Play that Hyde.
I'm not seeing necessarily multiple plays, so why don't you give us 1 or 2 more, and then I'll there's maybe one that I can decently like that I'll throw in there if you don't mention him.
Fat Rob, it's going up against Philadelphia. His ownership's going to be depressed because of what he's done the last 2 weeks, but the game flow didn't really lend itself to have him playing a lot. I could be wrong here. This is just a first glance, but I could see him easily putting up a big game against Philly, where they could easily get up ahead by a lot in the beginning. I mean, Wentz they've been a weird team all year. And then Jennings, I think, is worth the play just because of his targets. I think Dallas is going to put up a lot of points. They're going to be passing the ball late in the game. And the ridiculous pick of the week, the Gurley Bird special against Atlanta, who is not great against the run and not great against the pass. So if Goff decides to air out the ball at all, then that could take some pressure off of Gurley.
Yeah, it feels like Gurley's kind of the Barnage pick of this season at running back, in that every great spot, it's like, this is the spot, and you don't want to miss out on Gurley having a big game. But this is a phenomenal spot, and his price is low enough that these 10 to 12 points he's been getting would still not crush your lineup. I do like the Gurley call in that sense. I like the Rob Kelly call. I think Ryan Matthews is probably the guy under 5K I'd be most likely to use, just because if he comes back and gets the usage, he's expected to practice this Wednesday, and if he actually gets 15 to 18 carries against that Washington run defense, he becomes pretty valuable at 4K. He gets tons of usage near the goal line when he's playing, which makes him viable. And then the other guy I was going to mention was Isaiah Crowell, just because we're talking about that Cincinnati Cleveland game, and Crowell is going to
I was about to say him, JM. God damn it.
Well, there you go. And now we got another curse word thrown in there as well. So,
sorry about that.
But yeah, I think we all Grant and I heavily broke the rules there, so we can credit Crowell to you on that one.
No, but I'm in love with what Grant said. He switched my whole mind about something.
What was that? Let us in on it.
Gurley might be the best play of the week, period. And I think he'll be chalky, which kind of sucks. But
no one's that stupid.
I don't think anybody likes Gurley anymore.
And they're all wrong. This is the best situation in history. He's going to put up 30 this week. I think that if you put a Gurley, you got to get fine. Take David Johnson if you want sure things. I think Le'Veon's in a better spot against a team that, as good as their defense is prone to giving up the biggest game to running backs. Hello, Jay Ajayi. Le'Veon Bell, Lamar Miller, and Gurley. That's your running back, and your flex. The rest you can figure out on your own.
So we're going to move on to wide receiver and take Curse and Lockett off the board, since we all like them, and that would just be redundant. I'm even going to take Corey Coleman off because we've talked about him. And so with that, Grant, who is the one wide receiver who's standing out to you the most for savings this week?
I hate the guy so much, but I love the team. Dontrell Inman, 4,800. His price went down, I feel like, and I don't know why. I look into Benjamin's health because I still feel like he might be injured, but they're going to let the ball fly in this game. They're going up against Carolina with a pretty decent run D and not the greatest pass D. And so I think that he could be seeing a whole lot more targets than he did last week, where he still had 20% of the team targets, with Rivers only throwing 25 times. And he can catch a few deep balls at any given time. So huge ceiling, a decent price, and still not sure why no one in DFS is playing Chargers.
I had Inman this last week and was pretty pumped when he put up 12 points in the first 10 minutes of the game, and then trailed off after that. Bobby, who do you have at wide receiver for us?
I actually feel like there's a number of receivers that are interesting. If Humphreys was fully healthy, I would have probably picked him just because I thought he'd be off the board. And I see what they're doing there. I've watched Tampa Bay play way too often, which is kind of painful. The best value, there's one of the best 8 receivers in football is under 5,000 this week. And I just want to make that really clear. He will be in. This is going to sound funny now. It might sound funny at the beginning of next year. 2 years from now, you'll say, oh, that guy Bobby Firestone really knew what he was talking about. Will Fuller is just way too cheap, and he's an awesome matchup in a dome. I don't care if he has the worst statue of a fucking – oh, excuse me. Of an effing quarterback.
We got some work to do on the editing end of this podcast.
You know what? Until I saw that hoop video, when I was watching Grinders live and he did it like 17 times, I said, you know what? Maybe if I can get away with a few, I'm done with it. My last one. But if he wants to say something to me, I can bring back that video. Will Fuller is just clearing away the awesome play every week. This guy has 30-point potential every week. But it's really bizarre to me how you can have 2 receivers this good that are probably both top 10 receivers in the NFL, and you're that bad of a quarterback. You were retarded, Brock Osweiler. You should be killed. Not killed. Sorry, that's horrible. Punished, though, and never be allowed to play in the NFL. Tim Tebow could take your team to the Super Bowl.
Tim Tebow can take any team to the Super Bowl.
Tim Tebow can take a lot of teams. Maybe
right.
I'm with you. But anyway, the point is Will Fuller and Tim Tebow.
So I used Fuller weeks 1, 3, and 4 when he had 17 or more points each week. I love Will Fuller, and I agree he's way too cheap. I think I said this last week, when DeAndre Hopkins was $6K. I think we disregard just how terrible Osweiler has been if we think these guys are a lock any week, but the upside's certainly very clearly there every week. So I'm going to say I like the Bengals receivers who are 5K or below. I like the Bears receivers, but we covered those ones. So I'm going to mention Pierre Garçon at 4,200 against Philadelphia, who, again, is good over the middle, bad on the outside. Kirk Cousins will probably force the ball to Crowder and Reed a little bit to start out, but I also think that eventually some targets are going to be funneled outside toward Garçon, who already gets a lot of looks anyway. And so this is a good week for him to have a solid floor. And as we've seen, 2 of the last 3 weeks, he does have some upside. So Garçon's an interesting guy at 4,200. And then tight end, I'm going to say Jermaine Gresham at 25, just because I think that the usage is pretty permanently there at this point. We can rely on it. And he's not a great play, but he's useful enough to help you save salary and pay up in other spots. Bobby, what about you at tight end? Mute.
I didn't know what our price range was. I love Ladarius Green. Like I said, until he's 5K or above, I'm just going to play him. It just makes too much sense. He's 3,900. I know it's a little higher than we were talking about, but I mean, if you want to play Vance McDonald, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I'm not going to do that, but I think that Ladarius Green, Gary Barnidge are my 2 tight ends this week.
Yeah, and Green, I mean, Buffalo is just horrible over the middle. If you want, you can look at what Jimmy Graham did against them, what Rob Gronkowski did against them. There's like advanced metrics over the middle of the field. They're one of the worst teams in that area. Definitely a good spot to target Ladarius Green at 3,900. Grant, does that leave you with anything that has been overlooked at tight end?
Well, just pretty much any of the tight ends from the Houston game. You got Griffin, you got Dwayne Allen, you got O'Doyle, and you got that other guy, CJ Full-Dibber. They're both terrible against the tight end. Just play tight ends from that game. Throw 3 of them in one of your lineups, if that was possible.
All right, perfect. So we are – I guess we have to move on to bold calls, and we have to dish out punishment from last week. I guess we'll start with punishment. I had – my bold call was that at least 6 non-quarterbacks from the Saints-Lions game would put up 20 DraftKings points. I'm not certain on this, but I believe 0 put up 20 DraftKings points. So I lost horribly. Oh, there you go. Golden Tate. There was one.
He blew it away. That's crazy.
So And I spent the week trying to decide among like moving salary around with Golden Tate or Michael Crabtree and Jordy Nelson. It turned out that they all had big games, and I stuck with like Michael Thomas and Drew Brees in other spots, which really hurt me quite a bit. But anyhow, so Golden Tate was the only one. And so Grant, let's hear, since your bold call was Phillip Rivers would have a better game than Drew Brees, which was fully correct. It seems you've been excited about the punishment that you have to dole out for me. So what are my options this week?
Bobby's going to have to tell me if any of these are too mean. I'm not really sure at this point anymore. Number 1, I've stuck 4 different appendages in light sockets, none of which are fingers or toes. The answer may be shocking. Today I've decided to shave my body from the neck down. Smooth as eggs right now, mother fudger. Today marks the first time in 2 years I've used soap. It's disgusting. How can something that cleans make me feel so dirty? Hashtag soap scum. And the one you're probably going to hate the most. Tom Brady looks awful right now. The Patriots don't have a chance of making the Super Bowl. 0 chance. Hashtag it's the Seahawks year.
That should be the only one. That should be the only one. Number four. Why did you give him those other options? You're not mean to him. You're mean to me.
Yeah, you did Bobby Nickelback.
Not fair. Not fair.
Okay, Bobby, I'll let you decide it then.
I had to do Nickelback.
I was going to take the soap scum one.
On my birthday, man. On my birthday.
Bobby, then you get to pick his this week.
I've said in the past that any body-related things are things I'm not going to end up choosing, which would be
all the first 3.
I did do the bubble bath one, but the sticking appendages or shaving my body, I can't go with those. Soap was going to be my choice, but I will, in the interest of promoting the podcast and creating questions among Twitterers, I will go ahead and go with the Tom Brady one, since my call was as bad as it was.
No, but I like it, man. I think that's the ballsiest. I think it's the best move. It makes sense to your Twitter followers. You have the biggest following. You're going to get a lot of interesting responses, and you're going to have some answering to do, and you're not going to be allowed to answer.
Plus, it's all true.
I do have to say, I don't think that having the biggest Twitter following has, like, when I've had the losing tweet, I don't think it's helped promote the show at all.
Forget about promoting the show. We're just de-promoting you now, JM.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think we've helped any of us, but maybe
it's a thing for everyone. I think your people will find it interesting.
Yeah, maybe some people will retweet this with an explanation to non-listeners, and they'll start listening to our show. So who knows? Maybe it'll help out.
Their Twitter account, man. No cheating.
Maybe it'll help out. So yeah, I will post that, which brings us to this week's bold calls. And I kind of feel like we should go with some of these high-priced guys. We've had a lot of contentiousness throughout the show about which of these high-priced guys we should and should not be rostering. So it's not necessarily, unless you guys are against this, it's not necessarily bold, so to speak, but like Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, and Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown. Would we be interested? Would you guys be down with us all just picking one of those, and whoever has the worst game loses?
Yep.
I followed you all year, JM. It's always been about what you want. And this week, I totally agree with you as usual.
I didn't know where that was going. It sounded so mean at first.
Hey, I told you I'm not going to finish.
I was like, man, Bobby, the truth is coming out. I will say for listeners, the original plan was for Bobby to host this show and do all the hard work. And then Bobby said, JM, I think you'd be a better host. So that is why we follow my lead. But
thank you, JM. Thank you, JM.
It prepared me for when Jeff El Jefe ditched us on Friday night and I had to host that one. So I'm an old pro at this now, which most listeners would probably disagree with. But there you go. So I will take Mike Evans just because I know that Grant is strong on DJ and Antonio Brown. That was yours, is Mike Evans.
Of course,
but I don't mind Bell too. So
yeah, I don't mind pivoting off because Bobby, you said Bell as well. I'm less high. I'll take Le'Veon Bell.
All right, I've got my bold call coming. I want Grant to go before me tonight, if that's possible.
All right.
Oh, then I'm going DJ. You my DJ. Go D. I'm not going to sing.
All right, Bobby, what? You have something off the board from those ones?
Yeah, I'm just going to give you – I'm not allowed to give you my full 9-man DraftKings lineup, so I'm going to give you my 7 of my lineup. They're the same 7, and this is fair. Le'Veon Bell, Lamar Miller, Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, Sammy Watkins, Ladarius Green, Jermaine Kearse, and the Jets defense. Oh, that's 8. Take away the Jets defense. I sort of like
and Russell Wilson.
No, I named 7. 7, that was good. 8, actually, but 7. Just remember the first 7.
So what's the bold call? Just that you're going to win the Millie Maker?
That if you play Le'Veon Bell, Lamar Miller, Mike Evans, Michael Thomas, Sammy Watkins, Ladarius Green, and Jermaine Kearse, you're going to make a fortune.
With those. Have a 50-way tie at first.
You're going to have a 50-way tie at the top.
Yourself.
But no, I love all those calls. I like the Sammy Watkins call, which we didn't talk about, but he had 9 targets this last week. That was originally
Sammy Watkins put up 30.
That was originally one of the things I wanted to talk about this week, and then found some other things that were slightly more compelling because there's really not much to talk about with Watkins. He had 9 targets. Only caught 3, so at a lower ownership, but he's a great play this week. Bobby, you got to choose between Lev Bell and Mike Evans for the bold call. I'll take Lev Bell if you want to take Mike Evans.
I started to say Le'Veon. Le'Veon is my number 1 overall player. I have Mike Evans as number 2 overall. So I'm splitting hairs. So fine, I'll take whichever one you don't want.
I'll take Bell. You can take Evans, and we'll let. This is kind of a week. If you lose,
advantage for you. I feel like I should get odds for that. I mean,
we'll go PPR.
Well, you just said you wanted Evans originally, and I took him from you.
Price and position considered. I mean, I right now have a wideout in one of my 2 big lineups.
All right, I'll take Mike Evans. You take Le'Veon Bell, and I'm not asking for odds or concessions. So there you go.
Done.
And next week I can tweet about how, I don't know what would be bad, how I'm eating vegan, and that's so embarrassing. All right, so Bobby, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, just play Le'Veon Bell, Lamar Miller, Mike Evans, Tyrell Pryor, Michael Thomas, Ladarius Green, and Jermaine Kearse. That's my secondary lineup. Boom.
All right, Grant, any final thoughts?
In a pinch, SpaghettiOs can be used as pizza sauce. And Roadhouse, I got nothing.
That almost sounds like a human thing to do. Yeah, my final thoughts. Thanks for putting up with us, listeners. Thanks for hanging out. And we'll see you back here next week, same time, same place. We'll see you at the top of the leaderboards this weekend.
See ya.